It is time. We got a couple stragglers out in the foyer. Fred, I'm going to put this over here in this area. Can I give you this just in case someone raises their hand over here on this side? Is this mine? Anyone get water? Sure. If it's not, hopefully they didn't have some kind of disease or something. All right, so first question always on our Sunday night is any comments, questions, things you want to know about the sermon this morning, things you found to be enlightening or not so enlightening? Enlightened? It's always our first question. Anyone desire to be an elder? I mean, that was a good pep talk this morning, all right? Good pep talk. Well, all right, if there's nothing, we're going to jump right into we're going to, kind of continue this theme of leadership, but we are going to look at leadership lessons from the life of Joseph tonight. And one of the reasons why I picked Joseph is because he had an interesting life. He had a life that if certain people led that life and, experienced all the things that he had to go through, could have turned out much different, right? And so the first thing I want to ask tonight, what do you know about Joseph that made him a good leader? If you know the story, right? Joseph, who was sold into Egypt by his own brothers, sold in slavery by his own brothers, then brought to Egypt, Potiphar's wife, right, into prison. Then he became, second in command over all of Egypt. What are some things that are of note that you remember from the story? Don?
Well, one thing was he wasn't trying to please others. He was always doing what God wanted.
Okay. So especially kind of the ending statement, right? He was looking to please God. And what's one circumstance in his life that really exemplified him pleasing God over himself? Potiphar's wife. I mean, think about that opportunity he had. And doesn't power sometimes give you opportunities to take advantage? Can't power, it's weird how power works. It opens up very unique opportunities, not always good. And so he decided to not take advantage once. I mean, that could be saving his own skin, right? In one sense, because if you're going to sleep with the head guard's wife, what are some potential circumstances that could come? Potiphar, yeah, right? So there's an aspect in which, there's probably some self-interest in there. But a lesser man would have done what? They look at what's right in front of them, instant gratification over long-term results. And if you're thinking about leadership, do you want a leader who's interested in short-term results at the expense of long-term results? No. So a good leadership quality is someone who looks to the future, right? Where are we going to be, or where do we want to be in 5 years, 10 years? What's the benefit of going through an exercise of looking of where you want to be versus where you are? Well, you can measure your progress. Okay, you can set goals. Correct? Anything else?
It points out where you're lacking. Here's some things we know we definitely are lacking in, so here's
So it's a leader who can have some self, right? Reflect honestly about how things are actually going. Okay. So we'll look at that a little bit more. But anyone else think of some leadership lessons from Joseph, from his life? Okay, and that's a little bit different than pleasing God, because a lot of people please God, but who gets the credit? Right? Gives God credit. And that's something unique in the Christian sphere, isn't it? To be able to give God credit. Even if you are the one being used, even if you are the instrument by which God is affecting something, a good Christian leader always gives God the credit. And what's the benefit of that? So it acknowledges humility, right? Anything else? What's the benefit of giving God credit rather than taking it for itself? Besides just the fact of what it looks like. Helps others, all right? So you're modeling, all right? You're modeling in a sense. Anyone else? Okay, so real leadership, when it comes to the church, right? You look at like 1 Peter chapter 5, they're called under shepherds, aren't they? The real person who's in charge here is God. And what that does for especially the church is like what Paul says, we water, we plant, God gives the increase. And so we're not so much result-based, because if you start becoming a people pleaser rather than pleasing God, you start becoming results-based. You start looking at, right, I know I didn't put the numbers on a board and trying to figure out, are we being effective or are we not being effective? Well, if God is the one getting credit, then if things are not growing the way that we think, but we are doing exactly what God has asked us to do, that's God's area, is it not? And when the church becomes people-pleasing, that is when truth can kind of be set aside temporarily, because we need to figure out how can we get people in here. And it's not to say that we should not use wisdom, not to say that we should not be shrewd, as Jesus says, right? He wants his disciples to be shrewd, but we also can't set aside truth. So you've got a bad situation. I mean, he was in bad situation after bad situation after bad situation. And yet because, and when I say good attitude, I'm sure there were days where he was like, really? Right? Really? My brothers throw me into slavery. I finally kind of make my way up, right, in Potiphar's house, then Potiphar's wife. Then he gets thrown in prison. He interprets dream in prison. And what does he tell the baker and the cupbearer? Remember me. And all of a sudden, 2 years, 3 years go by, right? And he's sitting in prison until he is of need. Now, think about that for a moment. And that's where I want to talk about a little bit. What could have Joseph's stories been? With the way most people react to situations, what could his story have been? How could he have ended up? Well, dead. I'm talking about his attitude. Oh, yeah. You ever know people who want to be put in power just to be able to show that power over certain individuals or over people. Right? If I can get in power, then I can teach this person, right? Vengeance. What do you think about bitterness? What can bitterness do to a leader? Destroy him? And if it destroys him, who else is it going to destroy? Those whom he leads. Okay?
God gave him promises just like he gave Abraham promises. So the difference in him and Abraham is when Abraham didn't get his promises in the timeline that he thought they should come in, he intervened and tried to make them happen.
Yeah. And there's something to be said about God's timing, isn't there? There's something to be said, and that's the same, in the church, we can become very yearly focused. In the sense of, at the end of the year, we ask the question, right, how many baptisms did we have? How many restorations did we have? How many, and there will be years that are low, won't there? And we think of that year with low baptism, low restoration, maybe not a whole lot of Bible studies going on one year, as that's a low year, something we did wrong. And when you look at the grand scheme of Christianity over, if you kind of peer back, are there not times in history where Christianity was just small? There wasn't a whole lot of Christians. There weren't a whole lot of people. And there were times where it just blows up. And so sometimes there's this idea of we just need to continue doing what we need to do. And on God's timing, it may be 5 years. It may be 10 years before we really see the results of our work. And the results of our work, sometimes the results of Jesus' work was people leave. People walk away. And so to have patience in knowing that if we do what God asks us to do, He will bless our work. Okay? Anyone else? Anything else to add to that? Oh, that hammer.
Consequence could be a loss of faith as a result of pride or anger. We see that every so often.
I mean, think about how we view God and blessing. We view it the same way sometimes as the Pharisees did. Why was this man born blind? Who sinned, him or his parents, right? So we equate bad things going on in our life constantly, and we ask the question, where's God? How many times could Joseph have asked the question, where's God? And it wasn't until the very end, where he was in Genesis 50, where he was able to say, all these things, it was God who moved. From when I was sold into slavery at a very young age, living most of his life as a slave. We don't understand, most of his life was a slave. And then at the end, he was rewarded, in a sense, or he was brought out of slavery, but he was put in a position of power. And here's another thing, not just vengeance against his own family. Who are the people who enslaved him most of his life? Egypt. He was under the power of an Egyptian control most of his life. And then he's put over all of the people who persecuted him. And yet, he finds out there's going to be a famine. And what does he do? He spends 7 years preparing them for it, building storehouses, right? That gets back to leadership. Does that not get back to leadership? Competence, being able to see, being able to prepare for low years, being able to plan ahead. Amber.
That's what I was going to say.
What were you going to say?
Well, I didn't have confidence, but like that citizenship planning strategy.
Yeah.
Using what skill set he had for his,
Absolutely.
where his lot was in life.
And he learned a lot of those. I mean, think about how he learned patience. I mean, he learned patience in prison. He learned patience in slavery. He learned patience in continually going to the bottom and watching God, because it says over and over again, why did he succeed in Potiphar's house? God was with him. Why was he heard when he was in prison? God made him heard. Why did he succeed just because this man came out of prison and he interpreted a dream, does that automatically make him, I want to put him second over all of my nation? God was with him. And I think a strong leader knows when God is there, when God is present, and that they have a connection with God, and they believe that God is with them when they are making decisions. That's a prayer, isn't that? Don't you want a leader who's prayerful? Who's constantly relying, God, if this is the thing, if this is the door, let me walk through it. But we've got vengeance, bitterness, loss of faith. Can you think of anything else? I've got a list of 22. So we've got. What are some leadership lessons from the life of Joseph that you can think of? We've already got some, and how could have it ended up?
His life is a blueprint. God would put his children through the worst of the worst. That way people that don't live that life say, hey, if somebody looks for God, can go through this. Not come to it and not get through it. God will never bring you to anything. He won't bring you through if you rely on him. And he will let them go through that. How much more is he going to show me favor?
Okay.
If you live that struggle and you still do it even though you're going through that badness, perseverance. Thank you. I was trying to find
Well, there's perseverance, and there's also, let's put that up there. Perseverance, if you know I can't spell. Perseverance, but also, he's a living example, isn't he? I mean, he's a leader who can say, I've been down there. I've been at the bottom. You can't, there's nothing that someone could come to. Joseph, my life, I've had a hard life. I understand that. He could have empathy. He can have compassion. But he also can let people know it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And one of the number one qualities of shepherds in a church is being able to shepherd the flock. And unfortunately, most of the time, shepherding occurs when people are at their lowest, in the middle of a storm, they're going through something. And it is impactful to know that this has been done before. People have been brought through this. People have been brought out of this. You need to persevere. You need to have faith. Because the moment this starts becoming on the table, a lack of faith, God's no longer here, is when everything falls apart. Okay? And so think about something comes up in the church, a rift happens, a division happens, something major happens, it's catastrophic. Imagine you've got shepherds who've never gone through this before, something in their life. What are they doing?
I don't see endurance up there.
Well, perseverance, example. Perseverance, endurance, similar. But think about when chaos happens and then all of a sudden, okay, guys, let's calm down. Never say that to your wife, all right? But just let's take a step back. Let's look at this. God will see us through it. Okay? And so we've got this idea of perseverance, example. Anything else? And I'm going to run through some of mine after you guys kind of come up with yours. Okay. Here's one thing I want us to think about. Was Joseph always a model of leadership? How did he become a leader? Through adversity. Okay. Now, early on in his life, he gets some dreams, doesn't he? And after he has the dreams, what is the first thing he does when he figures out that he's going to be somebody? He goes to the family dinner table. I want to let you know what God has told me. That's the way I read it. I know some people don't read it that way, but there's no other way for me to read, because the immediate response from his brothers when he walks in and says, I'm going to be over all of you. You guys are all going to be bowing down to me one day. God has shown me. What triggered all the events to put him into slavery? They resented him. And so a good leader knows how to know that, okay, God's put you here, right? God's put you here. But how do you lead in such a way that does not put you above others? Peacemaker? Meek? What does the word meek mean?
Holding the reins under pressure.
Strength under control. Right? It's used to tame a horse. It's the same word to tame a horse. You take a wild horse, it's good for nothing, and you break it in a sense, and you tame it, and now it is strength under control. But how do you lead in such a way that is not haughty? I mean, yeah, we can talk about humility, and there's false humility, but how do you do it?
Using tact, specific communication skills, such as recognizing your tone
Yep.
and the way you present information, the manner in which you present that same information.
Yeah, so it's all about communication. Could he have communicated his dreams in a different way? Could he have said, hey, you know what, what do you guys think about this dream? And how can we work together to accomplish this goal? I see myself on a leadership path. God has put me on a leadership path, and I want to use that leadership not for you to bow down to me, right? Because Sam Walton, head over Walmart, he says the key to leadership is to not allow people who work for you to think they're working for you, but you're working for them. You're a leader, but the people who are working under you feel as if you're as much working for them as they are for you. Servant leadership. Jesus says, get a towel. Go wash some feet. Be willing to take on the lowest of jobs and see that as something that magnifies and glorifies God. Servanthood is something to be pursued. Willing to serve others. Okay? All right. Let's look at some things here. You guys got that one. Talked about that.
One thing I thought of, Jesse,
Go ahead.
was as a leader to remember where you once were, or, where I once was a Christian. I was not a leader to begin with.
Yeah.
And things that happened to me and struggles, that kind of keeps you from getting all-knowing in our lives.
Always remembering where you've come from. Right? Always remembering your past. Rick?
One thing I said after a good leader, he has to have compassion. Those who are less fortunate. I've seen ones that didn't, and I've seen ones that did, and the ones that did seem to be so much more effective. Sympathy and all these things.
So, in Jesus, one of his last parables that he tells his own disciples, these last kingdom parables are specifically to the 12. Go serve the least. Go serve the least. Because when people feel, even though they only can accomplish maybe something small, but yet the person who's supposed to be over them cares enough about their life and what's going on in their day-to-day, in a phone call, hey, how you doing today, can make the difference. And you want people to work? Care about people, right? Care about them. Love them. Okay? And so this kind of goes along with the next one, forgiveness. How does forgiveness play into leadership? How did it play in the life of Joseph? He made mistakes. He forgave his brothers. Pray for those who persecute you. But forgiveness. His brothers realized what they did. And remember when their dad dies, what do the brothers say? They thought that Joseph only held off on punishing them because their dad was still living, and the moment dad died, oh boy. Now, that's funny, isn't it? I mean, you ever have a boss move on and you get a new boss? And that new boss is somebody you used to work with? And you're thinking, oh boy. Right? He went from here to here, and you're kind of, how's he going to react? All the things that I could say about him when we were here, and we may have gotten disagreements on, now that he's here, what's he going to do? But a good leader learns to forgive. I mean, let's imagine you fired every single person that made a mistake in your organization. Every time they made a mistake. Now, one second. What did that forgiveness do for his brothers? What can forgiveness, can it not be a teaching moment? And can you not create an even stronger disciple? Okay, we messed up. We made a mistake. What can we learn from? And I think a great leader can take almost anything and make it a learning opportunity. This is a time to learn. Not a time to punish, right? There may be reprimand, there may be all those kinds of things, but especially in the church, we're trying to build disciples. And so disciples are going to make mistakes, right? People are going to make mistakes. Like kids, they make mistakes. And shepherds need to be able to, good leaders need to be able to forgive. Okay, that happened, right? You deserve. But the gospel is all about grace, is it not? And that's what Jesus did. He took people, you deserve death, and I'm going to give you forgiveness. And how will that empower you? Don't take this forgiveness and don't take this teaching moment and, squander it and go do it again. What can we learn? And so I think a great teacher is able to not just learn themselves, but also, let me get Rick and then you. Rick, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and this comes back to the idea, especially in the church. Once again, we can try to compare like organization, business, and church, but the church is kind of unique in the sense that we're a family, we're a kingdom, right, those kinds of things. But the power of redemption, which is the message of the gospel, is the power behind getting people motivated. The fact that you don't deserve a second chance. You deserve death. You deserve punishment, can actually bring a family closer together when we work through our problems than a leader who goes, you know what, you made a mistake and you sit over there and you sit over there. No, let's get in the same room and let's talk this out. And I think a good leader is someone who goes, hey, we got issues. We got an issue between you and you. We're not leaving this room tonight until we walk out of here okay. And it's not just a drill that we need to do. It is, we are a family. We are a family. We're not just a business. We're not looking to fire people, right? We are looking at how can we make this better. And Joseph, with his own family, recognized the fact that all these things made him stronger, made him better, made his family better. What did it stink that he had to go through all that to learn those lessons? Absolutely. Does it hurt when people sin? Absolutely. You can't just let sin slide. And he didn't. Did he not basically create a trial with his brothers to make sure they were still genuine? He wanted to know if they were presented with the same opportunity, would they make the same mistake? And they wouldn't do it. He's like, okay, you've learned. You are not the same people when you made this same. Anthony and then Justin.
When forgiveness is genuine, there's a heartfelt transaction which strengthens that bond that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But when you forgive somebody, there's also a sense of vulnerability. And when you demonstrate that vulnerability, you suspend, you put your feelings out there, and you don't know what's going to happen. The positive side of that is when your subordinate makes a mistake, they will also want to demonstrate that same vulnerability and share their mistake with you.
Yeah.
Because you modeled that patience in front of them, they do the same with you. That's that building of bondage.
I remember when I was over at Carnes at preaching school, and I won't name his name, but he was one of the elders there. And it was during maybe a lectureship or there was some kind of special thing going on. And he went forward. You know, the walk of shame that he came forward. And I remember I was naive. I was 19, in preaching school. I'm like, he's an elder. What is he doing? Coming forward. What is he doing? I mean, he needs to be the person that we're all looking to. He can't make mistakes. What are people going to think about this congregation if its own elders, right, the top of the top, have to come forward? I'm telling, it was probably still one of the most powerful nights that I've experienced of an elder coming forward and admitting, it wasn't adultery, it was something that he's going on in his life, and people who surrounded him came. The opposite reaction of what I was thinking would occur, where everybody's, the pointing fingers. And the next night at the meeting, like 20 people came forward. And it was led first by him. Even though he has all these things, Joseph is at the top, elders right there, they still got things to work on. And when people see that they still need the saving grace and the mercy of Christ in the church, they're still working, they're imperfect, and they're humble enough to come. I'm going to tell you, as an elder, that's a powerful moment of humility, but you've modeled it. And the next day, it got everybody thinking, well, if he's got stuff going on in his life that he needs prayer, certainly I do. And it was I just remember that as vivid. And everybody coming around and surrounding him, hugging him, praying with him. It was powerful. Okay? Justin. Yeah.
Because we're not all on the same level. We don't have all the same experience. But oftentimes we hold everyone to the same exact standard. And we can see Jesus doesn't hold the people that are around him to the exact same standard. The people that should know better are dealt differently than the person that is acting out of ignorance.
Yeah, how many times does the Bible say, are you not a teacher of the law?
He's a whole lot harder on the person to know better than he is on other people.
And then you got the woman caught in adultery who everybody's looking to stone to death. You who are without sin, that's wisdom. And leaders know how to handle those kinds of problems when everybody's coming down on somebody and turn it around and go, okay, you've got this issue. Who cast the first stone if you're without sin? That's a powerful teaching moment. It's wisdom. He's not let the lady off the hook, but he's also we need to learn to deal with sin differently, because how many people are no longer in the church that you know of because something happened in their life and the church reacted wrongly? They maybe had the right, hey, they sinned, we came down on them, but they're no longer here now. What could we have done differently that still acknowledged their sin And yet it was a moment of redemption and forgiveness and healing rather than, well, we got rid of the leaven. And there's a time, right? There's a time when, okay, this, as was brought up, this can no longer be handled. This is a continual infection now, and it's not just infecting them, it's infecting other people, and we got to be able to get rid of the infection. But like with my finger, I don't know if you know, I got an infection. Well, my wife told me probably a week and a half ago to get this taken care of. It would have been a whole lot easier to take care of it at the beginning than I got to the point where I was passing out, getting out of the couch because my infection was so bad. I didn't listen. Same result, I got taken care of the infection, but now I got a scar there, and it was not a pleasant experience, okay? And so leaders know how to kind of take things at the beginning. I want to read one thing in 2 Corinthians with Paul, because we're talking about vulnerability. This was brought up before. And it always amazes me that we have some of the weakest moments of Jesus' life displayed for everybody in the world to read. Right? When he was in the garden, he's doing the mission of God. He's doing exactly what he came here to do. And it's one of his points in his life where he's at his weakest. He prays. He's, sweating drops of blood. Lord, if this cup could pass from me, and yet not my will, but your will be done. And I want to look at the Apostle Paul real quick. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3, he says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort which we ourselves are comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort too. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. And if we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same suffering that we suffer." So Paul literally took moments when things were going good, I blessed you. When things were going bad, I blessed you. Every circumstance that Paul was put through, he thought, how can my sufferings help you? I receive comfort. I now know. Have you ever lost somebody or been in a really hard time and someone come up and say they're not well-intentioned, and I do this still to this day sometimes. You ask somebody, well, how you doing? And I go, ooh, because you know they're not doing well. But when you've gone through it, you've learned what actually comforts somebody when you're going through it and what to avoid. Paul says that's what I learned. Now watch this next verse. He says, "Our hope for you is unshaken, for we know as you share in our suffering, we will also share in your comfort. For we do not want you to be unaware, brothers, of the affliction we experienced in Asia, for we were so utterly burdened beyond our strength that we despaired of life itself." Anthony brought up the idea of vulnerability. If that's not the most vulnerable statement you can make, there was a moment when I felt like quitting. There was a moment in my ministry where I felt like giving up. Indeed, verse 9, and I'll finish. "We felt that we had received the sentence of death, but that was to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead." Once again, every moment in Paul's life, he tried to say, it was God and not me. God's strength, not my strength. And so there's vulnerability. And Joseph was able to do that. All right, thank you.